Real power is not what most people think it is. It is not dominance. It is not control over others. And it is not the ability to win every argument or prove every point. Real power is the ability to remain steady when everything around you is pulling for a reaction. One message can ruin an entire day. One comment can replay in your mind for hours. One moment of disrespect can drag you into anger, overthinking, or silence you later regret. Most people don't realize how often this happens. They believe life is exhausting, people are difficult, and stress is unavoidable. But the deeper truth is quieter and harder to face. Much of the exhaustion comes from constantly reacting, from letting emotions take the lead instead of awareness. This audiobook is not about becoming cold or detached. It is not about pretending you don't feel anything. Emotional control is not suppression. Suppression creates tension, and tension always finds a way out. Emotional control is something far more human. It is the ability to feel deeply without being dragged by what you feel. Every emotion is a signal. Anger signals a boundary. Fear signals uncertainty. Sadness signals loss. But signals are not commands. The moment you treat emotions as orders instead of information, you give up control. You move from choice to impulse, from clarity to chaos. Think about the moments you wish you could take back. The text you sent too fast, the words you said when your voice was tight, the silence you chose out of pride instead of peace. Those moments don't define you, but they do reveal something important. They reveal where awareness was missing and where awareness can be trained. In a world that rewards speed, reaction, and constant expression, calm has become rare. And because it is rare, it has become powerful. The person who pauses while others react carries a different kind of presence, not loud, not forceful, but grounded. People feel safe around it. They listen to it. They adjust to it. This audiobook is an invitation to slow down internally, even when life moves fast on the outside. Over the next hour, you will learn how emotional reactions are formed, why certain people and situations trigger you, and how to create space between what you feel and what you do. That space is where freedom lives. That space is where dignity is protected, and that space is where self-respect quietly grows. You don't need to eliminate emotion to live well. You need to lead it. Emotional control is not about winning against yourself. It is about understanding yourself deeply enough to choose wisely. When you learn to pause instead of react, you stop leaking energy. When you stop leaking energy, your life becomes calmer without becoming smaller. If you've ever felt like your emotions were running your life instead of supporting it, this is for you. If you've ever stayed silent too long or spoken too fast, this is for you. And if you're ready to build a calm that doesn't depend on circumstances or other people's behavior, stay with this audiobook. And if this message connects with you, share this video with a friend you know is going through a difficult time and needs it to improve their life. Chapter 1. Why emotional control is real power. Most people think power looks loud. They picture confidence as dominance, strength as intensity, and control as force. The person who speaks the most, reacts the fastest, or pushes the hardest is often mistaken for the one in charge. But this illusion only survives when life is easy. The moment pressure enters the room, the truth becomes visible. Real power does not announce itself. It reveals itself quietly in moments when emotions rise and most people lose themselves. Think about what actually happens when tension appears. A disagreement turns sharp. A boundary is crossed. Expectations are broken. In these moments, the room fills with emotion. Anger, fear, defensiveness, pride. Most people respond automatically. Their tone changes, their body tightens, their words speed up. And without realizing it, they surrender control. When emotions take the lead, power slips away. Not because emotions are wrong, but because unconscious reactions remove choice. The person who reacts emotionally is no longer directing the situation. They are responding to it. Their behavior is being shaped by external triggers rather than internal clarity. In that moment, they can be predicted, pushed, provoked, or dismissed. Emotional reactions make you readable, and being readable makes you controllable. This is why emotional control is real power. It allows you to remain centered when others are pulled outward. It keeps your decisions aligned with your values instead of your impulses. It protects your dignity when circumstances tempt you to trade it for momentary relief. Emotional control does not make you passive, and it makes you precise. Many people confuse emotional control with suppression. They imagine a person who feels nothing, shows nothing, and disconnects from life. That is not control, that is avoidance. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They wait, they build, and they often emerge in moments that cause even more damage. True emotional control begins with awareness. You feel the emotion fully. You recognize it honestly, but you do not let it decide your next move. You create a small distance between what you feel and what you do. That distance is subtle, but it changes everything. Within that space, power lives. Consider how often emotional reactions create regret. A message sent too quickly, a comment spoken with sharpness instead of clarity, a silence chosen out of pride rather than peace. These moments rarely come from intention, so they come from being overwhelmed internally. Emotional control is the ability to stay present enough to choose wisely even when the emotional volume is high. This ability is rare, not because it is impossible, but because it requires patience in a culture addicted to reaction. We live in a world that rewards immediacy. Respond now, share now, defend yourself now, prove your point now. But speed does not equal strength. In fact, the faster someone reacts emotionally, the more they reveal their inner instability. Calm, on the other hand, communicates something deeper. It signals confidence without explanation. It suggests self-trust. It tells others that you are not easily shaken. People feel this before they understand it. When someone remains composed under pressure, the dynamic of the interaction shifts. Voices soften, energy slows, and even conflict begins to lose its grip. Emotional control does not dominate others, it changes the emotional environment itself. And that is a far more durable form of influence. Power rooted in force must constantly be defended. Power rooted in emotional stability simply exists. This is why emotional control matters beyond moments of conflict. It shapes how you move through life. When emotions constantly dictate your behavior, your life becomes reactive. Your mood depends on other people's words. Your confidence rises and falls based on circumstances. Your peace feels conditional. But when emotional control is developed, something subtle changes. You begin to respond instead of react. You stop chasing validation in moments of tension. You realize that not every feeling needs expression, and not every provocation deserves your energy. Your inner state becomes less fragile. This is not about becoming indifferent. It is about becoming grounded. Grounded people are not easily manipulated. They do not need to win every exchange to feel whole. They do not explain themselves excessively to feel secure. They do not rush to defend their worth. Their power comes from self-possession, not external approval. Emotional control also reshapes how you see yourself. Each time you pause instead of explode, you build self-respect. Each time you choose silence over chaos, you reinforce trust in your own judgment. Over time, this compounds. You begin to see yourself as someone who can be relied on, especially in difficult moments. And that changes everything. Life will always bring pressure. People will disappoint you. Situations will test your patience. Emotional control does not remove these challenges. It changes how they land inside you. It turns stress into information instead of command. It transforms emotion from master into messenger. This is why emotional control is not weakness, it is discipline. And discipline is one of the highest forms of power because it cannot be taken from you by circumstances. Anyone can stay calm when things are easy. Real strength is staying centered when things are not. As you continue listening, remember this. Emotional control is not about perfection. You will still feel anger. You will still feel fear. You will still feel frustration. The difference is that you will no longer be owned by them. You will learn to observe them, to understand them, and decide how much influence they deserve. When you control your emotions, you control your actions. When you control your actions, you shape your outcomes. And when you shape your outcomes consistently, you become powerful in the only way that truly lasts. This is where emotional control begins. Not with force, but with awareness. Not with suppression, but with presence. And not with domination, but with quiet mastery. Chapter 2. Emotions are signals, not commands. Most people live as if emotions are instructions. When anger appears, they speak. When fear appears, they retreat. When frustration appears, they react. It happens so fast that it feels natural, even justified, but this habit quietly hands control away. The moment an emotion becomes a command, choice disappears. Emotions were never meant to lead your life. They were meant to inform it. Every emotion carries information. Anger points to a boundary that feels crossed. Fear highlights uncertainty or risk. Sadness reflects loss or unmet expectations. These signals are useful. They evolved to protect and guide you, but signals are not orders. A warning light on a dashboard tells you something needs attention. It does not mean you should abandon the car or smash the steering wheel. And yet this is exactly how many people treat their emotions. They feel disrespected and immediately attack or withdraw. They feel anxious and instantly avoid. They feel hurt and close themselves off completely. In each case, the emotion is allowed to decide the behavior. Over time, this creates a life driven by moods rather than intention. Emotional control begins the moment you separate feeling from action. This separation does not require force. It requires awareness. Awareness allows you to notice what is happening inside without becoming it. You can feel anger without becoming aggressive. You can feel fear without becoming passive. You can feel sadness without becoming hopeless. This distinction is subtle, but it is the foundation of emotional maturity. Many people fear that if they do not act on their emotions, they are being dishonest or weak. They believe authenticity means expressing everything immediately. But unfiltered expression is not authenticity. It is impulsivity. True authenticity includes discernment. It includes knowing when expression serves growth and when it creates damage. Emotions are honest, but they are incomplete. They show you one angle, not the whole picture. When you are angry, your mind narrows. When you are afraid, your focus shrinks. When you are overwhelmed, your thinking becomes rigid. Emotional control does not deny these states. It simply recognizes their limitations. It understands that emotions speak loudly but briefly, and wisdom speaks quietly over time. Think about how often emotions distort perception. A single comment can feel like a personal attack. A delayed response can feel like rejection. Saying a mistake can feel like failure. In these moments, emotions tell a story, but that story is rarely the full truth. Acting on it too quickly often creates consequences that last longer than the emotion itself. This is why emotional control is not about restraint alone. It is about interpretation. When you pause, you gain the ability to ask better questions. What exactly am I feeling? Why is this reaction so strong? What assumption am I making right now? These questions slow the emotional momentum. They return authority back to awareness. Awareness does not eliminate emotion, it contextualizes it. Over time, this practice changes your relationship with yourself. You stop fearing emotions because you no longer feel ruled by them. Anger becomes something you observe, not something you obey. Fear becomes information, not a stop sign. Sadness becomes a signal for reflection, not a verdict on your worth. This shift creates internal stability. You begin to trust yourself more, not because life becomes easier, but because you know you can meet difficulty without losing yourself. Many people never develop this trust. They live cautiously, trying to avoid emotional discomfort at all costs. They avoid conversations, challenges, and honesty because they fear what they might feel. Ironically, this avoidance gives emotions even more control. What you avoid begins to define you. Emotional control does the opposite. It allows you to face discomfort without collapsing under it. When you stop treating emotions as commands, you regain flexibility. You can choose silence when expression would escalate. You can choose engagement when avoidance would shrink you. You can choose patience when urgency would sabotage you. These choices compound into confidence, the quiet kind that does not need to announce itself. This does not mean you will always choose perfectly. Emotional control is not a switch. It is a practice. Some days you will notice emotions early. Other days you will catch them after they have already influenced you. Both moments are valuable. Awareness grows through repetition, not perfection. What matters is the direction. Are emotions leading you, or are they advising you? When emotions advise rather than command, you remain aligned with your values even under pressure. You stop saying things you don't mean just to release tension. You stop making decisions that soothe the moment but harm the future. You begin acting from intention instead of impulse. This is where emotional control becomes visible to others. Your reactions slow. Your presence steadies. Your words carry more weight because they are not rushed. People sense that you are not easily pushed off center. They may not understand why, but they feel it. And that feeling changes dynamics. People are less likely to provoke someone who does not react predictably, less likely to manipulate someone who does not leak emotion, less likely to disrespect someone who remains composed without effort. But emotional control creates a quiet boundary that does not need explanation. Internally, something even more important happens. You begin to experience emotions without fear. You realize that no feeling, no matter how intense, can force you to betray yourself unless you allow it. This realization is deeply grounding. It builds self-respect from the inside out. Emotions will always arise. That is part of being human. Control does not mean preventing them. It means relating to them wisely. It means listening without surrendering authority. It means staying present enough to choose who you are in each moment, regardless of how you feel. As you move forward, remember this principle. Feel fully. Observe honestly. Act deliberately. When emotions become signals instead of commands, you reclaim something essential. You reclaim choice. And with choice comes freedom, stability, and the kind of power that does not depend on circumstances. This is the next step in emotional control. Not silencing your inner world, but learning to lead it. Chapter 3. The pause that changes everything. There is a small moment most people never notice. It exists between what happens to you and what you do next. It is brief, often less than a second, but it holds enormous power. This moment is the pause. And for those who learn to recognize it, it becomes the doorway to emotional control. Most emotional damage does not come from what we feel. It comes from how quickly we act on what we feel. The faster the reaction, the less awareness is present. Words escape before thought. Decisions are made before clarity arrives. In those moments, the pause is skipped entirely, and impulse takes the lead. The pause is not silence for the sake of silence. It is awareness interrupting momentum. When something triggers you, your body reacts first. Muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallow. The mind begins constructing a story. This all happens automatically. The pause does not stop these sensations. It simply prevents them from turning into behavior before you are conscious of them. This is where most people feel powerless. They say things like, "It just happened," or "I didn't even think." But the truth is more subtle. Thinking was replaced by speed. The pause was overridden by habit. Emotional control begins when you reclaim that pause. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Silence can feel risky. Waiting can feel like weakness. There is often an urge to respond immediately, to defend, to explain, to correct. That urge is emotional energy looking for release. The pause asks you to hold that energy without discharging it right away. This holding is not repression, it is restraint guided by awareness. In the pause, you begin to see options. You notice that you do not have to say everything you think. You realize that not every feeling needs expression. You recognize that timing matters as much as truth. The pause gives you back choice. Choice is the core of power. Without the pause, emotions decide for you. With the pause, emotions inform you. This difference is small in theory, but life-changing in practice. A single paused breath can prevent an argument. A few seconds of stillness can preserve dignity. A moment of restraint can protect a relationship that would otherwise fracture. The pause also reveals something deeper about emotional reactions. Most reactions are not about the present moment alone. They are echoes of past experiences, old wounds, and learned patterns. When you react instantly, you are often responding to memory rather than reality. The pause allows the present moment to speak before the past takes over. This is why the pause feels powerful but unfamiliar. It interrupts conditioned behavior. Many people fear that pausing means losing control of the situation. In reality, the opposite is true. The person who can pause under pressure is the one setting the pace. When you do not rush to respond, the emotional temperature of the interaction begins to change. Others may feel unsettled by your calm, not because you are dominating, but because you are not playing the expected role. Silence creates space, and space shifts dynamics. In conversations, the pause communicates confidence without words. It signals that you are not threatened, not rushed, and not desperate for approval. People often reveal more when you pause, and they fill the silence with their own thoughts, clarifications, or insecurities. The pause turns listening into an advantage. Internally, the pause serves another purpose. It gives your nervous system time to settle. Strong emotions activate the body's threat response. The pause allows that response to soften before it dictates action. Even a slow breath can reduce the intensity enough to restore clarity. This is why emotional control is physical as much as mental. The pause anchors you in the body. You may notice that when you pause, emotions rise more clearly before they fade. This can feel uncomfortable at first. Many people react quickly because they are trying to escape the feeling itself. The pause asks you to stay with it a little longer, to feel the discomfort without running from it, to discover that emotions, these no matter how intense, are temporary. This realization is deeply stabilizing. If emotions pass, you do not need to rush. Over time, practicing the pause builds trust within yourself. You learn that you can handle emotional intensity without losing direction. You realize that you do not need immediate relief to survive discomfort. This trust becomes the foundation of calm confidence. The pause also helps you align actions with values. When you act without pausing, you often act in ways that conflict with who you want to be. Later, regret appears. When you pause, even briefly, you give your values a chance to speak. You ask yourself, often unconsciously, is this how I want to show up? That question changes outcomes. The pause is not something you master once. It is something you practice daily. Some days you will remember it easily. Other days you will forget and react before awareness arrives. Both experiences are part of learning. Each time you notice the absence of a pause, you strengthen your ability to find it next time. Progress in emotional control is measured in seconds, not perfection. As you continue, begin to see the pause not as a delay, but as a form of respect. Respect for yourself, respect for the situation, respect for the future consequences of your actions. The pause protects you from trading long-term stability for short-term release. When you pause, you stop feeding unnecessary conflict. You stop escalating situations that do not deserve your energy. You stop giving others the power to dictate your inner state. This is not withdrawal from life. It is engagement with clarity. Eventually, the pause becomes part of who you are. You no longer force it. It appears naturally as awareness grows. Your reactions slow, your presence deepens. Others begin to feel that you are steady, even when circumstances are not. This steadiness is not accidental. It is built moment by moment through the pause. Remember this as you move forward. You do not need to control every situation. You do not need to respond to every emotion. You only need to notice the space where choice exists and learn to stand there calmly. That space is the pause, and within it, emotional control becomes real. Chapter 4. Why other people trigger you. Most people believe their emotions are caused by other people. A careless comment, a disrespectful tone, a look that feels dismissive. When these moments happen, the reaction feels justified. It feels obvious. They caused this. They crossed a line. They made me feel this way, but this belief quietly removes your power. The truth is more uncomfortable, but far more freeing. Other people do not create your emotional reactions. They activate them. And what can be activated already exists within you. A trigger is not an attack. It is a signal. When someone triggers you, it does not mean they are right or that their behavior is acceptable. It means that something inside you has been touched. A sensitivity, a belief, a wound, a fear. The intensity of your reaction is rarely proportional to the situation itself. It is proportional to what it connects to internally. This is why two people can experience the same situation and react completely differently. One remains calm, the other becomes defensive or angry. The difference is not strength or intelligence. It is awareness of inner terrain. Triggers reveal where emotional control has not yet been built. Many people spend their lives trying to manage external behavior instead of understanding internal reactions. They want others to speak differently, act differently, respect them more. While boundaries matter, relying on external control creates a fragile sense of stability. The moment someone behaves unexpectedly, emotional balance collapses. Emotional control asks a different question. Not, why are they like this? But, why does this affect me so deeply? This question is not self-blame. It is self-ownership. It shifts attention from accusation to awareness. And awareness is where control begins. Triggers often come from unresolved experiences. Past moments where you were ignored, embarrassed, dismissed, or misunderstood. The body remembers these experiences even when the mind tries to move on. When a present situation resembles a past wound, the nervous system reacts as if the past is happening again. This reaction feels immediate and personal, but it is rarely about the present alone. Understanding this changes how you relate to difficult people. Instead of seeing them as enemies, you begin to see them as mirrors. Not because they are right, but because they reveal where emotional charge still lives within you. And this does not excuse poor behavior. It simply removes its ability to control you. When you are triggered, the urge is to react outwardly, to correct, defend, or withdraw. Emotional control asks you to pause and turn inward instead, to notice what sensation arose first. Tightness in the chest, heat in the face, a sudden rush of thoughts. These physical cues appear before words and actions. The body reacts before the story forms. By noticing this early, you interrupt the automatic cycle. You recognize that something internal has been touched. This recognition alone reduces intensity. It returns you to the present moment where choice exists. Triggers lose power when they are understood. Many people fear this kind of self-examination because they think it makes them vulnerable. In reality, it makes them resilient. If someone can only affect you through a trigger you have not explored, they hold leverage. Once that trigger is understood, their influence fades. This is why emotional control is deeply connected to self-knowledge. The more familiar you become with your emotional patterns, the less reactive you become. You stop being surprised by yourself. You stop being hijacked by old narratives. This does not happen overnight. It happens through repeated observation. Each trigger is an invitation, not to justify the other person, but to learn something about yourself. What expectation was violated? What insecurity was touched? What fear surfaced? These questions are not meant to be answered perfectly. They are meant to slow the reaction and deepen awareness. Over time, something shifts. Situations that once felt unbearable begin to feel manageable. Comments that once provoked anger lose their sting. You begin to feel space where there was once tension. This space is emotional control growing quietly. It is important to understand that emotional control does not mean you will never feel triggered again. Being human means being sensitive. The goal is not numbness. The goal is recovery. How quickly you return to center after being activated matters more than never being activated at all. Recovery time is the true measure of emotional mastery. As awareness grows, you notice that many triggers lose relevance entirely. They no longer match who you are becoming. When your sense of self stabilizes, fewer things feel threatening. You no longer need constant validation or defense. Your worth feels internal, not negotiable. This internal grounding changes how others experience you. When people realize they cannot easily provoke you, interactions shift. Some may respect you more. Some may lose interest in testing you. Either way, you remain intact. Emotional control creates a quiet boundary, not built from force, but from clarity. Triggers also teach humility. They remind you that growth is ongoing, that strength is not the absence of reaction, but the willingness to learn from it. Each time you choose awareness over blame, you reclaim a piece of power. This is not about becoming detached from life. It is about staying present without being pulled off center. When you stop giving your triggers authority, you stop handing your emotional state to external circumstances. You realize something essential. No one has the power to control your inner world unless you give it to them. As you move forward, begin to see triggers as teachers rather than threats. They point directly to where emotional control can deepen. They show you where attention is needed. And once attention is given, the charge begins to dissolve. The goal is not to eliminate difficult people. It is to become unshakable in their presence. When you understand why other people trigger you, you stop fighting emotions and start leading them. And in that leadership, emotional control becomes stable, grounded, and real. This is how power returns to where it belongs. Inside You, Chapter 5. Calm under pressure is a trained skill. Many people believe calmness is something you either have or you don't. They describe themselves as naturally emotional, hot-tempered, or too sensitive, as if these traits are fixed. When pressure arrives and they lose control, they tell themselves this is just who they are. But this belief quietly limits growth. Calm under pressure is not a personality trait. It is a trained skill. If calm were purely genetic, no one would ever improve. Yet you've seen it happen. You've watched people who once reacted intensely learn to slow down. You've seen individuals who used to panic begin to respond with clarity. These changes did not happen because life became easier. They happened because emotional control was practiced, not wished for. Pressure is the training ground. Most people try to build emotional control by avoiding stress. They seek comfort, distractions, or environments where nothing challenges them. But avoidance weakens emotional capacity. Just as muscles grow through resistance, calm grows through exposure to manageable difficulty. Emotional control is built in moments of tension, not in moments of ease. When pressure appears, emotions rise naturally. Heart rate increases. Thoughts accelerate. The body prepares for action. This response is not a flaw. It is biology. The problem begins when the mind treats this activation as a threat instead of a signal. When pressure is interpreted as danger, control collapses. Training calm means changing this interpretation. Instead of seeing pressure as something to escape, you begin to see it as something to stay with. You allow the discomfort to exist without immediately trying to fix it. You remain present long enough to notice that intensity does not last forever. This experience slowly rewires your response. Each time you stay calm a little longer than before, you expand your capacity. At first, this practice feels unnatural. The urge to react will be strong. Silence may feel awkward. Pausing may feel risky. Your mind may insist that immediate action is necessary. This is where training begins. You do not need to eliminate the urge. You only need to delay acting on it. Delay is discipline. Small delays matter. Taking one breath before speaking, waiting a few minutes before responding to a message, choosing not to react to minor provocations. These moments may seem insignificant, but they compound. Over time, say they teach your nervous system that pressure can be tolerated without chaos. This is how calm becomes reliable. Many people expect emotional control to feel peaceful immediately. It does not. In the beginning, it often feels tense. You are holding energy instead of releasing it. You are staying with discomfort instead of escaping it. This tension is not failure. It is adaptation taking place. Just as physical training creates temporary soreness, emotional training creates temporary strain. What matters is consistency. Each controlled response builds trust between you and yourself. You begin to see that you can handle more than you thought. That realization changes how you approach challenges. You stop fearing emotional intensity because you no longer see it as overwhelming. This is when confidence deepens. A calm under pressure also requires realistic expectations. You will not always respond perfectly. There will be moments when emotions break through faster than awareness. Training does not eliminate mistakes. It reduces frequency and shortens recovery time. That is progress. Emotional mastery is measured by recovery, not perfection. When you recover quickly, you regain control without self-punishment. You reflect instead of ruminate. You learn instead of condemn. This mindset keeps training sustainable. Harsh self-judgment weakens emotional control by adding shame to the process. Calm grows best in an environment of patience. As your capacity increases, pressure begins to feel different. Situations that once felt overwhelming begin to feel challenging but manageable. Your internal dialogue softens. You stop catastrophizing. You recognize that you can stay grounded even when outcomes are uncertain. This internal steadiness becomes visible externally. Others notice that you are harder to rush, harder to provoke, harder to destabilize. You speak with more intention. You listen more fully. You react less dramatically. These changes alter how people treat you. Calm commands respect without asking for it. Importantly, trained calm does not mean emotional distance. You still care, you still feel, but your feelings no longer hijack your behavior. You can be firm without aggression, honest without cruelty, present without being overwhelmed. This balance is powerful. Training calm also reshapes your relationship with fear. Fear often signals uncertainty, not danger. When you learn to remain calm while feeling fear, you stop making decisions solely to avoid discomfort. You begin acting in alignment with values rather than emotions. This shift expands your life. You take healthier risks. You speak when it matters. You stay when it's uncomfortable but meaningful. These actions reinforce emotional control further. They prove to you that calm is not fragile. It is durable. It holds under strain. Over time, calm becomes your default response, not because you force it, but because you trust it. Your nervous system learns that pressure does not require panic. Your mind learns that clarity arrives when you slow down. Your identity begins to shift from reactive to grounded. This is the true outcome of training. A calm under pressure is not dramatic. It is subtle. It does not draw attention to itself, but it shapes outcomes quietly and consistently. It protects relationships. It preserves dignity. It allows you to act from strength instead of impulse. As you continue forward, remember this: you do not need to eliminate pressure to build emotional control. You need to meet it differently. Each moment of restraint is a repetition. Each pause is practice. Each conscious response is completed. Calm is not something you wait for. It is something you build, one pressured moment at a time. Chapter 6. Stop explaining yourself to feel better. Many people explain themselves not to be understood, but to feel relieved. They speak longer than necessary. They justify their decisions. They clarify emotions that do not need defending. And when they are done explaining, they feel temporarily lighter. But something important has been lost: power. Over-explaining is often mistaken for honesty or openness. In reality, it is usually driven by discomfort. The discomfort of being misunderstood. The discomfort of being judged. The discomfort of sitting with tension without trying to fix it. Explaining becomes a way to escape that discomfort. But relief gained this way is fragile. When you explain yourself excessively, you hand emotional leverage to others. You reveal insecurity instead of clarity. Once you signal that your inner stability depends on external validation. Even when your reasons are reasonable, the act of over-explaining weakens your position. Calm authority does not argue for itself. This does not mean you should never explain. Explanation has its place. The difference lies in intention. Are you explaining to clarify or explaining to soothe anxiety? Are you sharing information or seeking reassurance? The body often knows the answer before the mind admits it. When explanation is driven by emotional discomfort, it rarely creates respect. It often invites more questioning, more judgment, and more pressure to justify yourself further. What began as a simple explanation turns into a cycle of defense. Emotional control begins when you notice this pattern. Many people feel compelled to explain because silence feels unsafe, and silence leaves space for interpretation. It removes control over how others perceive you. For someone whose sense of worth depends on being understood, this can feel threatening. Explaining becomes a way to manage perception, but managing perception is exhausting. The more you try to control how others see you, the more reactive your emotional state becomes. Every response becomes a test. Every misunderstanding feels personal. Over time, this erodes calm and replaces it with vigilance. True emotional control allows space for misunderstanding without collapse. When you are grounded internally, you no longer need to correct every assumption or clarify every motive. You recognize that being misunderstood is uncomfortable, but not dangerous. You learn to tolerate that discomfort without rushing to resolve it. This tolerance is strength. Or silence, when chosen consciously, is not avoidance. It is restraint. It communicates confidence without words. It signals that you trust your actions more than your explanations. People may not always agree with you, but they begin to sense stability. Stability invites respect. Over-explaining often appears during moments of emotional charge. Someone questions your decision. Someone challenges your boundary. Someone misinterprets your intention. The urge to explain arises immediately. It feels urgent, necessary, but urgency is a sign that emotion is driving the response. The pause you learned earlier applies here. Before explaining, ask yourself a simple question. Does this explanation change anything meaningful? Will it clarify a misunderstanding that matters, or will it simply ease my discomfort? If the answer is emotional relief, silence is often the stronger choice. Silence allows emotions to settle. Silence allows clarity to return. Silence allows others to reveal their true intentions. When you stop explaining unnecessarily, you also stop negotiating your self-respect. You stop proving that your feelings are valid. You stop seeking permission to be who you are. This shift is subtle but transformative. You begin to stand without leaning. Many people fear that if they stop explaining, they will appear cold or distant. In reality, the opposite often happens. When you speak less but with intention, your words carry more weight. When you do explain, it feels deliberate rather than defensive. This selectivity strengthens communication. Emotionally controlled people do not rush to be understood. They focus on being aligned. Alignment creates coherence. A coherence creates trust. Trust does not require constant explanation. There will be moments when explanation is appropriate, when clarity is needed, when collaboration depends on shared understanding. Emotional control does not eliminate explanation, it removes compulsion. Compulsion is the difference between calm and chaos. As you practice restraint, you may notice discomfort at first. The urge to speak may feel intense. The mind may warn you that silence will cause damage. Stay with this discomfort. Observe it. It often fades faster than expected. And when it does, you realize something important. Nothing collapsed. This realization builds confidence. You learn that you can allow moments to pass without fixing them. You discover that not every misunderstanding requires correction. You begin to trust the strength of your presence rather than the precision of your words. Over time, this changes how others interact with you. People sense that you are not easily pulled into emotional negotiation. They adjust their approach. Some may push harder at first. Others may step back. Either way, you remain centered. Centered people are difficult to manipulate. Internally, you experience greater peace. You stop replaying conversations. You stop wondering if you said too much or too little. You stop needing immediate reassurance. Emotional energy is conserved rather than spent. This conservation is crucial. Emotional control is not just about reactions. It is about where you invest your energy. When you stop explaining yourself to feel better, you redirect energy toward awareness, patience, and intentional action. You become less reactive and more deliberate. This shift supports every area of life, from relationships to decision-making. Calm does not argue for its existence. It simply is. As you continue practicing emotional control, remember this principle. You do not need to be understood by everyone to be at peace. You do not need to justify your boundaries to honor them. You do not need to explain your worth to protect it. Silence, chosen wisely, is a form of self-respect. When you stop explaining yourself to soothe emotion, you reclaim authority over your inner state. You allow clarity to replace urgency. You allow presence to replace defense. And in that space, emotional control deepens quietly, steadily, and powerfully. Chapter 7. Detach from winning. Every emotional battle. Most emotional exhaustion does not come from life itself. It comes from the need to win. Win the argument, win the explanation, win the emotional exchange. Many people believe that if they do not defend themselves, correct others, or prove their point, they are losing something important: their pride, their status, their self-respect. So they stay engaged in battles that drain them long after the outcome no longer matters. But emotional control begins where the need to win ends. Not every disagreement is a threat. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. Not every emotional reaction deserves a response. When you treat every moment as a battlefield, your nervous system never rests. Calm becomes impossible because vigilance becomes constant. The need to win emotionally is often rooted in identity. If being right feels tied to your worth, losing an argument feels personal. If being respected feels fragile, silence feels dangerous. In these moments, emotions push you to fight, not for clarity, but for validation. Validation-seeking reactions rarely lead to peace. Winning an emotional battle may feel satisfying in the moment, but it often leaves behind tension, regret, or distance. You may prove your point, but lose connection. You may defend your pride, but damage trust. Over time, these small victories accumulate into larger losses. Emotional control asks a harder question: what actually matters here? This question shifts focus from ego to intention. It forces you to consider the cost of engagement. Is this conversation moving toward understanding, or simply feeding emotional momentum? Is this reaction aligned with who you want to be or with who you feel pressured to defend? Detachment does not mean indifference, it means discernment. Detaching from the need to win allows you to choose peace without feeling weak. It allows you to step back without feeling defeated. This choice is deeply countercultural in a world that rewards loud certainty and constant opinion. But calm authority does not compete. It observes, chooses, and moves on. Many people fear that detachment will make them invisible or powerless. In reality, detachment protects your energy. It keeps you from investing emotionally where returns are low or non-existent. It allows you to conserve attention for what truly matters. Attention is power. When you stop chasing emotional wins, you regain clarity. You see situations more objectively. You recognize when someone is speaking from insecurity, fear, or projection. Instead of reacting, you allow their words to pass without internal disruption. This does not happen instantly. The urge to respond will still arise. Training detachment begins with noticing that urge without obeying it. You feel the impulse to correct, to defend, to explain. Instead of acting, you pause. You remind yourself that silence is not surrender. It is a strategic choice. Silence often reveals more than words ever could. When you disengage from emotional battles, something interesting happens. Others may escalate at first. They may push harder, provoke more, or seek a reaction. This is a test, not a threat. They are accustomed to emotional engagement. When it disappears, they feel the imbalance. If you remain steady, the test ends. Detachment changes dynamics because it removes the fuel. Emotional conflict requires participation. Without it, intensity collapses. This is why emotionally controlled individuals often appear unbothered. Not because they do not feel, but because they do not feed unnecessary cycles. Internally, detachment creates space. Space for reflection, space for calm, space for choice. You begin to realize that many emotional battles are not about truth or resolution. They are about control, about dominance, about ego seeking reassurance. When you stop engaging, you reclaim authority over your inner state. This authority builds self-respect. Each time you choose not to react, you reinforce the belief that your worth is not up for negotiation. You no longer need to prove yourself in moments of tension. This quiet confidence stabilizes your identity. Detachment also improves communication. When you are not emotionally invested in winning, you listen better. You respond more thoughtfully. You speak when it matters, not when emotions demand expression. Your words become fewer, but more precise. Precision creates impact. There will be moments when engagement is necessary. Emotional control does not mean avoiding all conflict. It means choosing your battles intentionally. When values are at stake, when boundaries are crossed, when silence would compromise integrity. In these moments, engagement is calm, direct, and grounded. No drama, no escalation, no need to win. Winning emotionally often means walking away with peace intact. It means preserving relationships where possible and preserving dignity always. It means understanding that not every disagreement needs closure to be resolved internally. Closure is not always external. Sometimes it is a decision. As you practice detachment, you may notice discomfort at first. The mind may insist that something must be said. That silence is dangerous. Stay present. Observe the discomfort. It often fades, leaving behind clarity. This clarity becomes addictive in the best way. You begin to prefer peace over victory, calm over control, stability over ego. Detachment also teaches humility. It reminds you that you do not need to be right all the time to be secure. That growth does not come from constant defense, but from quiet understanding. This humility strengthens emotional control rather than weakening it. Over time, your emotional landscape changes. Fewer things provoke you. Fewer situations feel urgent. You respond with intention rather than reflex. Life feels less chaotic, not because it changed, but because your relationship to it did. This is the power of detachment. When you stop trying to win every emotional battle, you start winning something far more important. You win clarity. You win peace. You win the ability to move through life without being pulled into unnecessary conflict. Emotional control is not about conquering others. It is about mastering yourself. And mastery begins the moment you realize that not every fight is yours to win. Chapter 8. Becoming the person nothing can shake. There is a moment when emotional control stops feeling like a technique and starts feeling like an identity. You no longer ask yourself what to do in every situation. You simply notice that fewer things disturb you. Fewer words linger in your mind. Fewer situations pull you off center. This is not because life has become gentle, but because you have become grounded. Becoming unshakable is not about building armor. It is about building roots. People who are easily shaken often appear strong on the surface. They argue well. They react quickly. They express themselves confidently. But beneath that intensity is fragility. Their stability depends on circumstances behaving a certain way. When those conditions change, emotional balance collapses. Unshakable people are different. They do not need conditions to cooperate in order to remain calm. This calm does not come from detachment from life. It comes from deep familiarity with oneself. You know your emotional patterns. You recognize your triggers early. You understand the difference between what you feel and who you are. This understanding creates a quiet center that remains steady even when emotions move around it. At this stage, emotional control is no longer effortful. It is embodied. You still feel anger, disappointment, fear, and sadness. But these emotions move through you rather than take over you. You allow them to arise, be felt, and pass without clinging or resisting. This flow prevents buildup. It prevents explosion. It prevents regret. What changes most is your sense of time. You stop feeling rushed internally. When you are unshakable, urgency fades. You no longer feel pressure to respond immediately, to fix everything, or to control outcomes. You understand that clarity arrives when you give yourself space. You trust timing. This trust reduces anxiety and sharpens judgment. Judgment is clearer when emotions are not fighting for control. Your presence begins to change. People may not notice anything dramatic at first, but they sense something different. Conversations feel steadier around you. Conflicts lose intensity. Emotional chaos finds less traction. This is not because you manage others, but because you manage yourself. Self-management influences environments. Becoming unshakable also reshapes how you relate to failure. Mistakes no longer define you. They inform you. Emotional control allows you to see failure without spiraling into self-criticism. You correct course without self-punishment. This resilience accelerates growth. Resilient people recover quickly because they do not resist reality. At this stage, you no longer need emotional control to protect yourself constantly. Your boundaries are internalized. You know what matters and what does not. You choose where to invest energy and where to remain neutral. This selectivity preserves strength. Strength conserved is strength multiplied. Unshakable people do not avoid discomfort. They meet it with curiosity. They ask what it has to teach rather than how to escape it. This mindset transforms challenges into training. Life becomes less threatening and more instructive. This shift is subtle but profound. You also begin to notice that emotional control attracts stability. Relationships improve not because you try harder, but because you bring less chaos. People feel safer around those who are not reactive. Trust grows naturally. Communication becomes clearer. Calm invites honesty. Importantly, becoming unshakable does not make you rigid. It makes you flexible. You adapt without losing yourself. You listen without absorbing everything. You engage without becoming entangled. This flexibility allows you to navigate complexity without exhaustion. Rigid people break under pressure. Flexible people bend and return. At this stage, emotional control feels less like control and more like alignment. Your actions reflect your values consistently. You say less, but mean more. You move with intention. You no longer need to prove strength because it is evident in how you carry yourself. Presence becomes your language. There will still be moments that test you. But emotional mastery does not remove life's unpredictability, but the difference is that these moments no longer define you. They pass through awareness without leaving lasting damage. You remain intact. This is what it means to be unshakable, not invulnerable, not emotionless, but steady. As you reach this point, you may realize something unexpected. Emotional control was never about controlling emotions at all. It was about building a relationship with them, one based on respect, understanding, and leadership rather than fear or suppression. You lead your inner world instead of fighting it. This leadership creates inner freedom. You no longer feel trapped by moods or reactions. You choose how to show up regardless of circumstances. This freedom is quiet but powerful. It cannot be taken away by others. It does not depend on success or approval. It belongs to you. Becoming unshakable is not a destination you reach once. It is a way of moving through life. Some days you will feel centered. Other days you will wobble. The difference now is that wobbling does not scare you. You know how to return. Return to breath. Return to awareness. Return to choice. As this audiobook comes to a close, remember this. Emotional control is not about resisting life. It is about meeting life fully without losing yourself. It is about standing calmly in the middle of uncertainty and trusting that you can respond wisely. Nothing needs to be forced, and nothing needs to be proven. When you become the person, nothing can shake. The world does not need to change for you to feel steady. You have already built what matters most, and that is real power. As this audiobook comes to an end, it's worth returning to where everything began. Emotional control was never about becoming harder. colder, or detached from life. It was about becoming steadier, about learning how to remain present when emotions rise, rather than being pulled away by them. What you've explored here is not a collection of tricks, but a different relationship with your inner world. You've seen that real power does not come from forcing outcomes or controlling other people. It comes from self-possession, from the ability to pause when reactions demand speed, from the courage to feel emotions without surrendering to them. This kind of control is quiet. It doesn't announce itself, but it shapes every decision, every interaction, and every direction your life takes. Emotional control is built moment by moment, and in the breath you take instead of speaking too fast. In the silence, you choose instead of explaining yourself. In the detachment that allows you to walk away from unnecessary conflict. These moments may seem small, but they compound. Over time, they change how you experience pressure, relationships, and even yourself. You may not notice the shift immediately. Growth of this kind rarely feels dramatic, but one day you'll realize that situations that once consumed you now pass through you. Words that once lingered no longer stay. Tension that once controlled your mood loses its grip. This is not because you stopped caring, but because you learned how to care without losing yourself. Remember, emotional control is not about perfection. You will still react at times. You will still feel overwhelmed, frustrated, or uncertain. The difference now is awareness. Awareness allows recovery, and recovery is where mastery lives. Each time you return to center more quickly, you reinforce the person you are becoming. That person is grounded. That person is calm under pressure. That person is not easily shaken. As you move forward, don't rush the process. Let emotional control grow naturally through practice and patience. Treat each challenge as an opportunity to strengthen your inner stability. The goal is not to eliminate discomfort, but to trust yourself in its presence. Calm is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. Detachment is not indifference. They're all expressions of strength when chosen consciously. If this audiobook helped you see emotional control differently, take that understanding into your daily life. Practice the pause. Listen more than you react. Choose clarity over urgency. Over time, you'll find that your inner world becomes quieter, stronger, and more reliable. And if you know someone who feels overwhelmed, reactive, or emotionally exhausted right now, share this video with them. It may be exactly what they need to begin improving their life.